Hey, I'm Alex Ratcliffe from Board Game Co., and this is my top 10 disappointments of 2023. 2023, like basically every single year before, it has been a great year for board games, a lot of fun things, a bunch of top games that have come out, changes to my top 100, all the usual things, and this is unfortunately not those. These are the games that let me down to some degree, and I will say as we go through these that these are ranked kind of in order of what I found most disappointing, but not ranked in order of what was the worst game, if that makes sense. Some games I expected more from than others, some games less so, but ultimately all of these games are games that gave me experiences that I found myself wanting. I found myself wanting more out of those experiences, and some of them, I'd say, not necessarily some of them, one of them, maybe two of these, I still have hopes that I'll change my mind on, at least where I am currently. But starting off, these are my top 10 disappointments, starting with number 10, which is Tiger and Dragon. Now, Oink games in general have a passionate audience, and unfortunately, I'm not in that audience. I don't mind their games. I've played their games, Scout in particular I find to be fairly fun, but I've rarely walked away from an Oink game seeing the magic behind it in a way that there are people who go to conventions, and the one thing they have on the list is, I have to pick up the newest Oink game. I have to get the newest Oink game. Whatever came out. I have Scout, Tiger and Dragon, dozens of other names that I'm not. Hidden Artist, I don't know. There's tons of these games. I don't know offhand what they are. But there's a lot. Deep Sea, is that one of them? There's so many Oink games, but people are very passionate about those titles. And I've played maybe 4 or 5 of them, and they've always been fine. They haven't really overly impressed me. Scout is so far my favorite one that I've played, and even that I don't consider to be blown away by. But Tiger and Dragon in particular, based on the description of the game when I saw it, I was like, this isn't even a small box Oink game. This is like a slightly larger box Oink game, and I was very excited to dive into this one, to give this one a shot and see how I like it. But ultimately, one of my least favorite Oink games, if not my least favorite. I thought the gameplay just felt like playing the cards you have, playing the tiles you have. I didn't feel like it felt overly clever. I'm sure there's a game here and a nuance to it that changes exactly how... I'm sure there's something here. But for me, Tiger and Dragon was a disappointment. It was a disappointment. My number 9 was going to be Terraforming Mars, the dice game. Terraforming Mars, the dice game over here, and I didn't have particularly high hopes for this, to be fair, which is why it's a little lower down the list, but I still hoped to enjoy it. Hoped to enjoy it enough. I mean, I know I love Terraforming Mars, and that has made every follow-up or variant slightly harder to follow because I'm always comparing them to Terraforming Mars. I made that mistake with Ares Expedition, which looked like it had great art, combining Terraforming Mars gameplay with Race for the Galaxy, which is another game I enjoy, and I figured the combination of all those things just felt like it was going to hit it out of the park. And then for me, it unfortunately was a letdown when I first got it, although as I played it more, as I did some small house rules to it, as the expansions have come out, I found Ares Expedition continued to deliver in a way that originally it had let me down on. But that can't be said for the dice game. I walked in with lowered expectations. I walked in resolved not to compare it to Terraforming Mars. It's not the same game. It's operating in a different space. But I found the choice here, the meaningful decisions, to be less interesting. I found so much of your actions came down to mitigation around bad rolls, and so much of the game just felt underwhelming to me. I understand that there could be an audience here. I don't think it's a bad game, but I do think it does a disservice to the Terraforming Mars brand, and at least so far, I have no clue what the future will hold, but unlike Ares Expedition, I've yet to come around on this one and see whether it changed my mind. Ultimately, for me, Terraforming Mars, the dice game, is, I mean, I'd recommend other dice games over Terraforming Mars if you're looking for that kind of experience, and if you're looking for Terraforming Mars, either get Terraforming Mars, or even Ares Expedition, which I think does have a lot of reasons to suggest it over Terraforming Mars, despite the fact that I'm still in the Terraforming Mars camp myself. My number 8 over here is going to be War of the Ring, the card game. I walked in with high hopes on this one. This is one of those tug-of-war 2-player experiences, although it actually has a 4-player mode as well. A 4-player mode is just often recommended as the ideal way to play it, and I played it as the 4-player mode. The idea of leaning into the Lord of the Rings universe, which I do enjoy, the idea of trying to mitigate the War of the Ring big box experience into a smaller experience, still a long one, this is like still a 90-minute long game, but the idea of all these things combining to give you an experience that gives you that tug-of-war, that gives you the thematic sense, the thematic agency of the game, a lot of things going on in this experience, and to be fair, I think there is a good game here. I just don't think there's a good game here for me. Specifically because I feel this is a game that will benefit strongly from players knowing the decks incredibly well. You're constantly pulling from different decks. You're constantly referencing different things. I think this is a game system that doesn't operate at its best when you have a handful of plays under your belt. And even once you do have a handful of plays under your belt, even if you do have 5, 6, 7 plays under your belt and you've started to learn the intricacies of the decks, you still have to be mindful of the fact that whoever you play against should ideally be on the same playing level as you. They might have to either know as much or not know as much as you do as you go through this game. It puts it in a very hard spot for me to enjoy. And so I heard a ton of good things about the game. It was more accessible War of the Ring, and it's an IP I like, and art I like, and presentation I like, and rules I like. But ultimately, that memory aspect, the aspect that you have to really know the systems to be able to get the most out of this, and you have to play it with players who also know the systems, that put it in a camp where I just lost all interest in continuing to dive into it, because it's not the kind of experience I want to enjoy. I want to experience experiences that I can pick up pretty fast, and that you can pick up pretty fast, so I don't have to worry about who I play it with or constantly pull back my plays. I have a handful of games that exist under that framework in my collection, but I keep it at a handful for a reason. I don't like that player imbalance. My number 7, Dorfromantik, the board game. Also not a bad game, not a bad game by any means. I've enjoyed Dorfromantik. I played through half the, not really campaign, but the gameplay of it. The basic idea of Dorfromantik is you play a bunch of tiles to score a bunch of points. The points you score unlock more tiles and more ways to score points. Then you rinse and repeat, and ultimately you're constantly escalating new ways of scoring and new ways of scoring points, such that your first game, maybe you score 120 points, but by the time you get to your final game, you might be scoring hundreds, 450 points or whatnot for that experience. You're just adding more and more win conditions. This is based on Dorfromantik, the video game, and I think it's a fun time. But you never lose. There's not a real sense of challenge. There's just a sense of let's just keep playing it until you keep playing it. To me, this gave me the lightness of a game like My City, but without that little bit of an edge that keeps you moving forward. I believe there's going to be a Dorfromantik 2-player version coming out, and that has more interest to me, because I potentially... The nature of the game, first of all, by the way, it's recommended as a solo/cooperative game, but ultimately a cooperative game just means you're making all the decisions together bit by bit. You're just basically saying, hey, we'll alternate placing tiles. It's less rewarding to me than just playing this game straight solo. I've played this at 2 players and I've played it at 1 player. I prefer the game solo, but neither way is it ultimately a game that really drives home for me. I think there's still a good game here. I understand the appeal of it. I'm happy it has worked for so many people, but for me it was a lighter game than what I'm looking for, and one that doesn't have any real sense of strong challenge to it. There is a sense of how do you get the best score, but that sense is not present enough for me to have the incentive to dive back into this for 18 plays or however many plays there are. It's variable because it depends on how many things you get done, is how fast you unlock stuff, so it's not a fixed number of plays, but ultimately I was there for half the experience, not the whole one. My number 6 is going to be Epic 7 Arise, the board game. This was my lowest rated game on the list. So the reason it's not my number 6 over here is only because I didn't have particularly high hopes or ambitions for this game. It was vaguely on my radar. I was interested when I was on crowdfunding, and then when it came to retail, when oh my gosh, Johanna Games picked it up. That's when I got a chance to try this one. But it wasn't one that was very high on my list of interest. It looked cool. It looked like a cool game. It's a dungeon crawler with cool miniatures, cool art. Those basic things look fun. The miniatures are great. And so overall, I was kind of not that interested until I got it. Then I was a little bit more interested. And then I played it and rapidly fell down a cliff on this one. This is my lowest rated game, not just on this video, but one of my lowest rated games ever from the games I've actually rated on the channel. More often than not, I self-select the games I get. More often than not, to me, the game's ratings are going to range more often from like a 2.5 to a 5. You're rarely going to see lower than that. It does happen infrequently, but I give us a 1.5 out of 5. It was so bad as far as the execution of the game, the balance of the overall mechanics, the way the game plays out, component issues, rules issues, left, right, and center, whatever kind of issue you could have with a board game is present in Epic 7 Arise. So to me, it's not the biggest disappointment only because I didn't have that high hopes for it, but it's a lot. And this is I got excited once I unboxed it. Like once I unboxed it and was going through the miniatures, I got excited for it, and the gameplay looked like it could be fun. And this comboing that looks like it has like a nice vibe of getting so much done. It just comes at the cost of any sense of balance for the game. This is a hot mess, unfortunately. Epic 7 Arise. This is yeah, a hot mess. So a definite disappointment over here. My number 5 is going to be Barrage New Lands, and this is the one that's going to ruffle some feathers, I assume. Barrage is a highly rated game, and I mentioned earlier I still have hopes with 2 of these games. This is one of those 2 games. I've played Barrage one time so far, that's it. But Barrage is one I was looking forward to very heavily, both based on the rules itself, based on the kinds of games I like, based on the sheer amount of love for the game system. I was strongly looking forward to Barrage, and I still have it in my collection. I backed the 2-player map of this campaign over here, and then I had a chance to play the game, and I just found that it felt fine. It didn't feel like a bad game, to be clear. I didn't mind the game. It didn't do... There are a lot of Euro games out there, and some will take more games to see or experience their brilliance from them, and I kind of like the genre in general. I like the genre of trying to make all your gears turn in the exact appropriate way that results in the most victory points. I have fun with that as a genre. I think is so much satisfaction to games like Leonardo da Vinci to... Not Leonardo da Vinci, I'm banking. No, what's Leonardo? Lorenzo Magnifico, to Golem, to Expeditions, to Apiary, to I have so many, what's it called? Food Chain Magnet, to so many games. I can't remember. Coimbra. There's a ton of game systems out there that have you turning different levers in different ways to try to get as much as possible out of the system. And I find they are generally a rewarding genre that I usually like to some extent. And the question is, do I like you enough that I'm going to choose and pick you over other games in the same genre? And Barrage in particular, as I think is like number 35, number 36 on Board Game Geek. And between that and knowing people who've played the game who love it, I totally thought this would be my jam. And my first game for me wasn't. It wasn't bad. It just was okay. I didn't get a strong sense of everything and the way it interconnects in a way that I'd find rewarding. And I'm skeptical. It's one of those games where I'm going to play it again. I'm going to give it another shot. I'm going to see where it goes. But based on my first play, I just was merely okay with it. It was not bad at all. It was just, I was okay. It was fine. You did these things. They gave you points. You flowed water. You did all that stuff. You earned more points. It's just, I didn't get the sense of satisfaction I normally get when I play this style of game. And so ultimately for me, Barrage, definitely disappointment because I had such high hopes for it. And it's the main one on this list that I do hope turns around with multiple plays. But where I am right now with this one, I debated, do I dive into it more? Do I continue to try to see where it's at? Or do I just move on to the next game? And for right now, I'm going to be diving back into it. But I debated that, which is a level for me. Moving on to number 4, we have the Hunters AD 21-4, second printing and expansions. I backed this game based on people telling me, hey, you should get this game, it's really good. Like, way back when I covered the campaign, people were like, this is like Gloomhaven, but better. This gives you a giant, epic, sprawling adventure with upgrading your character, with your own base, with all these things that Gloomhaven does, but this one does it better. I got peer pressured into backing it. I'm not blaming anyone, I take responsibility for my own actions, but I got peer pressured into backing this game, and then I sat there when it eventually did show up, I unboxed it, I talked about it, I was excited for it, and eventually I sat down, read the rules, dove into it. There were things that did well. There were lots of things that did well. Like, lots of elements of the game I think are well done, but the table space is completely obnoxious, and so many other elements of the game just feel like you're working a little bit too hard to get something out of the system. Like, the table space it requires a full table setup, and it's not an easy game to pack up and put away in between sessions. You kind of want to have a dedicated covered table space for this game for however long you're going to be playing through it. And so ultimately for me, I thought it was a fine experience that did a lot of things well, but it's not one that I would personally recommend when diving into this kind of experience. It wouldn't be my first choice, and again, as usual, happy a lot of people like it. For me, this one wasn't for me. I will say, despite that, I was still interested in the follow-up campaign they had. They had another campaign over on GameFound which takes the same system and puts it in more of a medieval space, and I'm still interested in that one. I'm not getting it. I have some degree of self-control, but I was interested in that one because it took the same system, made it look better, but I'm not sure how much of that is aesthetic and theme versus how much of the actual gameplay changes. My number 3 is Legacy of You. This one started off high. I played my first game of Legacy of You. I backed this game on Kickstarter. I don't usually back games from Garfield Games because they've been more miss than hit for me. They are a phenomenal publisher and their games do incredibly well. Like, many people consider Garfield Games an insta-back company, and I understand why. For me, they had Hadrian's Wall, which worked great, and they've had a bunch of games that I enjoyed but didn't love. And so Legacy of You, I took the chance on it. A solo campaign, go through a bunch of missions, try to survive as the waters, build the canal, stop the water, stop the bandits, do all the things you need to do in this experience. And when it eventually showed up, I learned the rules like that week. I started my first game, and I loved my first game. I thought it was an excellent push and pull. The balance of the game, the things you're trying to do to mitigate things going wrong, it felt like such an incredibly good experience, to the point that I started doing a playthrough series. Like, I'm going to play through all these games on camera. I'm going to film them all. I'm going to go through them. And I played, and then I played, and then I played, and as I played through the game, I found that I had a few things that kind of got in my way, but the biggest thing for me was that ultimately the core system, when you lose the game, you get a perk that helps you win, and when you win the game, you get a perk that helps you lose, and they don't feel like small balancing mechanics. They feel like huge shifts that make the difference from whether you win or lose in the game. The game is so well balanced in terms of how you have to operate that the small differences they give you when you win or lose kind of feel like when you win, they are setting it up so that you will lose, and when you lose, they are setting it up so that you will win, assuming you're trying to play in any way optimally. It just felt like such strong shifts that by the time I got like 6 or 7 games in, I didn't feel rewarded in what I was doing anymore. I feel this potentially could have operated better as a one-shot experience, at least for me. I'm sure a lot of people are enjoying this one. I'm happy they are. For me, this would have worked better as a one-shot experience where you play a single one, as opposed to forcing myself to go through the same game again and again and again with small differences to it, with a degree of not only legacy but campaign elements. Cards get mixed in, but you're going through repetitive motions while not even feeling strongly in control of your own agency. This started off very, very high, and I still think it's a good game, but for me, like, the degree to where it started to where it finished, I I was sad. I had such high hopes for it too. Like Garfield Games, like they've been an interesting publisher for me. I will say I love Wayfarers of the South Tigris, and that one I haven't cooled on at all. But Legacy of You started off so high and then cratered pretty quickly. My number 2 is going to be Habitats from Allplay. Now, Allplay has actually been on a roll for me this past few months. I've been playing a lot of games from Allplays that have just continued to deliver rewarding, fun experiences, from Chomp to Fiction to other games that I'm not remembering, to Roll to the Top. I've been playing a bunch of their games that have really been, I anticipate keeping around for some degree of time. We'll see how long any of them last, but Allplay in general, I always think their games are good, and some last, some don't. For right now, those 3 that I've played this past few months have really been doing well for me. But Habitats is one that I was excited to play because this is based off of a similar system as Nova Luna, Sagani, Framework, those kinds of games from Uwe Rosenberg, that kind of core system as far as how you build out connected chains of stuff. And so to me, I was like, the production of Allplay, the rules accessibility of Allplay, and then the game system that I already know I like, and so I'm sure I'll love this game. And I thought it was the worst one of the 4. Like, of that series where you're building connected chains and everything scores off everything else. So as you put it on a tile, you're getting new scoring requirements, but you're also fulfilling other scoring requirements. I found Habitats to be the most confusing, the least rewarding, and the least enjoyable from all 4 of those game series, when I thought it would have the chance to be the best one for it. So again, not a bad game, but I'd highly recommend Framework or Nova Luna over any of the other games. I think Sagani's also good, but again, a little complicated considering... a little unnecessarily complicated relative to what you're getting out of the experience. But for me, Habitats, I am very much looking forward to this one. I thought it was going to be an absolute knockout of the park. And again, Allplay's been doing great for me, but Habitats this year, unfortunately, was a miss. And my number 1 disappointment is a complicated conversation. My number 1 disappointment of 2023 is Lorcana. And this is not about the gameplay. It's not. I'm not saying the gameplay is amazing, but nor is it particularly bad. I've had a chance to play the game a few times, and I think it's a fun game. I think it's a fun game with potential for it to grow and develop and get better as you go through it. And I had such high hopes for Lorcana. I was very, like, I've been out of TCGs for years. I did Magic the Gathering for a few years, for like, I don't know, 5-6 years. I got out of that and then shortly later got into board games, and it's been a fun journey for me overall. But Lorcana was like, I was finally ready to go back to TCGs. I was finally ready to spend money on these games in a way that I have successfully avoided doing for a very, very long time. And then it launched, and the complete lack of reasonable availability for the game made it so that I just lost interest. I created hard. If you were watching my channel, I was like, hey, by the way, you know, maybe we'll have like a once a month video on Lorcana talking about what's going on, because it's Lorcana and I'm excited and I want to be here for it, and I think it's doing incredibly well. It's incredibly successful and I'm happy for them, and maybe I'll dip my toes into the water later. But for right now, they took all my hype and buzz about this new trading card game that's going to take the market by storm. It's going to be playable with your friends, playable with your family. It's just an enjoyable overall experience, and then the lack of being able to get the game. I mean, it's already, if you get into TCGs, you're already paying more money than you would for most board games once you get a decent way into it. But the fact that they made it so that you just have to like really run to any store or pay premiums, and you have to hunt to get your hands on stuff, they took all of my personal interest out of exploring the system. And I was like, you know what? Honestly, I should be avoiding TCGs anyway. I should be. I don't have the time or space or energy for this level of immersion into a game. Even Marvel Champions, the game I love, I can barely keep up with. And so why am I doing this? Their lack of availability brought me back to common sense, which I'm still torn whether to feel grateful for or annoyed by. But definitely, as far as things I was looking forward to in 2023, Lorcana was one of the things I was very much excited for, and when it launched I was very into it, and then it just cratered hard because it was so hard to get your hands on it. And it's one of those things, because if it was too easy to get your hands on, it could die as well. I think Lorcana is doing well, and I think they're going to have a very successful continued launch, and they are addressing the approaches as far as what kind of availability and scalability do they need. It's hard to measure a market. Print too much and you just lose money. Print too little and you create accessibility issues. They printed an absolute ton and they still couldn't keep it in stock. So I'm happy for them. I'm happy for the success of the line. But for me, Lorcana is one of my biggest disappointments of 2023 by the nature of where it is in this video. That's what I have. That's my 2023 list, my 10 biggest disappointments of the year. Nothing here like is a particularly bad, well, Epic 7 Rise is a particularly bad experience. Everything else here is more about the nature of expectations versus reality. Where you start, where you end up, what you're hoping for along the way. Most of the time, I walk away from game experiences, find myself almost more impressed. Surprises. I already did a video of the top 10 surprises of 2023 on Sunday. You can check that out. If you want to see the games that I wasn't really expecting that much from that delivered, if you want something a bit more positive, you can check out that video. But if you want to know the game experiences that let me down this year, these 10 are definite candidates for game experiences. I was hoping for more from them, and ultimately, despite that, I'm mostly done with them. Barrage is the main one I still want to play again. Lorcana, maybe things will change, I don't know. But Barrage and Lorcana, a little bit of hope for those, but not a ton. In any case, until next time, I'm Alex Ratcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I hope you have a good one.